Good afternoon. I would like to call to order the September 7th Citizens Advisory Committee meeting. We currently do not have a quorum of members in person. So I will be calling roll, but we won't be establishing a quorum. The time right now is 1:38 p.m. As there is no quorum currently, and we do not have a chair or vice chair here in person, we will be electing a chair pro tem, but we will not have any of the items on the agenda as action items. They will have to be informational if we do not reach a quorum. At this time, I'm only asking those CAC members attending in person to respond by saying here when I call your name. I do want to remind you to unmute your microphones by pushing the button on the bottom of the base prior to responding. And please do note that we've had a little bit of a lag when turning on our microphones, so you might take a second to see the red light turn on. I'll go ahead and start with calling the roll. Ryan Rossi.
Here.
Michael Fitzpatrick. James Garvin.
Here.
Mike Bruner. Ramona Bean. Paula Ryan.
Here.
Jim Knight.
Here.
James Bonfiglio.
Here remotely.
Okay, we'll get to that in a moment.
Okay.
Richard Vasilati.
That's not turning red.
Yeah,
here.
there you go. Here.
Is it
Thank
on? Yeah,
yep.
no, I couldn't see it.
Barissa Das.
Present. Is it on?
Yes. Yep. As long as the red light comes on, it's on. Sammy Brown. I did see Sammy come in, so we'll come back. Mark Forrest. Vijay Mishra.
Here.
Francisco Gill. Myron Uman. Terry Brown. Greg Fagan.
Here.
The municipalities of Belglade, Green Acres, Jupiter, and Lake Worth Beach are all vacant, so they will be marked as absent for this meeting. Albert Richwagen, Wendang, absent. We do not currently have a quorum in person. Normally, we would move to allowing our virtual members to be brought into the meeting, but because we do not have a quorum, we're not able to do that. That being said, we do have 3 members joining us virtually. That's Terry Brown, Ramona Bean, James Bonfiglio. They're able to make comments throughout the meeting, but they will not be able to be counted as like member comments. It will be public comments. And then the items on the agenda going forward will only be informational.
Excuse me, James Bonfiglio. I have
Yes.
a question, I guess, to the acting chair. I'm not there because I tested positive for COVID. I could jump in the car, be there in about a half an hour or so and isolate.
We cannot have folks join us in person who have recently tested positive for COVID.
Okay.
For those of you who are joining us virtually, it'll be an excused absence. It's out of your control that you weren't able to be here in person and we didn't meet a quorum to allow you to attend virtually. But we will work on making sure.
Okay,
your
the rules
absence
would
occurs.
prohibit me from even trying to sit in a corner and away from everybody with a mask on.
Yeah, we cannot allow
Okay.
folks to
right.
join us in person if they've tested positive, but thank you for making the effort. So item C on our agenda is a motion to approve minutes. We will move that to our following meeting in October. Oh, and I'm sorry. We can elect a chair pro tem to preside in the absence of the chair and vice chair for this meeting. So I'd just like to open up the floor to nominations.
Can I nominate Paula Ryan? She's had experience in leading meetings, I think.
Okay, so I heard a nomination from Richard
Bonfiglio.
Bonfiglio online. And James, you're actually participating as a general public member rather than
I'll make that
so I
motion.
can't.
so I'm sorry, Jim, was it Jim Knight and Richard Vasilati is second? Okay.
5 more minutes.
Okay. Perfect. So Hearing no further discussion, I have a motion by Jim Knight and a second by Richard Vazzalotti. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Alrighty, all those opposed, nay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, give us one moment to get Paula
Thank
set
you.
up to chair the meeting quick.
Okay. Thanks.
Where was he
Okay.
gonna go? You saw her over there?
Okay.
Comment from members for this report, and then instead here.
So we're not even gonna discuss it. We'll just wait. Right. Gotcha. Okay, thanks. Is Wendang just absent, or is she running late?
No, she is absent today. She's at
Okay, gotcha. Thanks. Okay, so you want me to start? You want me to pick up? Where are you? You're in, we can't. approve the
yes,
minutes?
it will be on C. We're not able to approve the minutes because we don't have a quorum, but we will return back to that item in October.
Okay, so we're on item number D, which are comments from the public and from the general public and public comments on any agenda items. Are there any public comments?
Not at this time, Madam Chair.
And now we have the opportunity for comments from the chair or member comments. Anybody have any comments they'd like to share? Okey-doke.
Oh,
It's on.
mhm.
I was curious where they were with the bus route from the mall to Rosemary Square. What's going on with that? The mall? From the Wellington Mall to Rosemary Square? I know there's a for it.
Sure. So,
Thank you.
thank you, Richard. My name is Brian Rusher, Deputy Director for Multimodal. We have a ongoing study called the Okeechobee Corridor, Multimodal Corridor Study that runs as Mr. Vassalotti was describing from the Wellington Mall up State Road 7, turning right on Okeechobee Boulevard all the way up to the square. We have a public website, I believe it's palmbeachokistudy.org. We'll follow up with that if it's incorrect. But the status of that is that we are currently receiving our final draft from the consultant. We've started providing comments to them. We anticipate that study going before the governing board in either October or November, and that should be kind of the final concept. The preferred desired concept was a light rail train, which would run center line. So that's really what the status is. There's, I can offer more detail after the meeting if you would like. We can have a discussion about it, but that's currently where we're looking at. It's probably next month. It's where we'd like to have our draft plan in place. For all committees, yes, thank you.
I could ask just one more question on that. So the design that's being recommended was a light rail train.
The preferred concept.
Is that the,
yes.
is that
So,
the most expensive one?
no, that's not the
Which-
most, not
which
the elevated. So
Okay,
the two light rail concepts that were proposed was an elevated train
Mm-hmm.
similar to what is in Miami-Dade County. That was not proposed as the desired concept. What the process will look like is our committees will receive that desired concept plan and final plan in October. And then what happens next is that we bring that recommendation to the Florida Department of Transportation and our partners at Palm Tran. That requires FDOT to take that, we're calling it, it's not even really a feasibility study. They're going to look at the concepts with more technical analysis, roadway concepts, transit concepts, and see if it's really feasible and it's something that is going to work on Okeechobee Boulevard. The desired concept plan that we're putting forward is really a visioning concept where we can establish how we get there.
and what was the price of that again?
Off the top of my mind, I don't have the number, but I'll look it up if you want to come and catch me after.
Has there been a study on the economic benefits? If this were to take place, how it would improve economically the downtown area?
Sure. So we looked at each potential proposed station area. And we looked at the potential for housing, non-residential, square footage, jobs, and a number of other benefits for each station area to be inclusive of the different types of economic developments and redevelopment opportunities that are there. And that will be included in the final report.
I'm thinking besides jobs and all that, mostly for like restaurants and patronage
Right.
downtown
It
area.
includes non-residential square footage for each station area as well.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
So I've been told I have a public comment and am I assuming that it's on this issue?
Yes, we do have a public comment. It is James Bonfiglio, who is, although on the committee, is currently a member of the public with this comment. So, Mr. Bonfiglio, if you'd like to unmute, feel free.
Hi, thank you. I didn't realize I should have raised my hand at the earlier part of this discussion, but I apologize for that. The short time I've been on this committee, I've noticed that we have a hard time getting a quorum on occasion. So two issues I think we need to discuss at some point in time, maybe staff can look at it, is encouraging appointments to the vacant seats so that we can get a quorum. And number two, looking at what we can do to reduce the number required for a quorum so that we don't face this issue in the future. That's my comment. Maybe staff could put something together for the next meeting on those two issues.
Okay, great, Jim. I know we've talked about this a little bit in the past, and it's a matter of whether or not we've got members that have been appointed by other public bodies. So if staff wants to bring a discussion on that forward next month. Great. Any
Thank
other
you.
comments? I'd like to follow up on what Richard asked with respect to the study. I know there's a lot of conversation in the county about extending the sales tax and adding a component that would go towards affordable housing. And I know there's been discussion in the past about paying for the corridor study and whatever the ultimate results are through a potential tax proposal to the residents or to the county. Is that still on the table? Whatever the decision is made with respect to what to do, is there a idea that we would go out to the public and ask for a sales tax on that?
Brian Rusher again, Deputy Director of Multimodal. I think that the funding mechanisms for Okeechobee Boulevard Multimodal Corridor City are still very much so to be determined. You know, I think that we came up with preliminary concepts and some prices associated with them based off of engineering best judgment, based off of federal guidance on how we should develop these types of plans. That being said, there is obviously a transportation surtax now. It's split between the school board and a number of other projects between the city and the county that is set to expire either in 2024 or 2025. There are a number of ongoing discussions about what that surtax could fund. It could certainly fund operations of transit like it has in Miami-Dade County and in Broward County. Those communities have been very successful in what they're doing with their surtax and expanding on conversations that we have been trying to have in Palm Beach County for quite some time. So could a surtax be part of it? The equation to implementing a enhanced transit service, not just on Okeechobee Boulevard, but any other parallel north, south, east, west corridor? Absolutely. Whether that's been determined, that's a little bit further down the road for us to, really discuss at this moment.
Great. I know that Broward and Miami have done a great deal, and I'm looking forward to us getting on that.
Absolutely.
board.
That will be part of the conversation.
Thank you.
Excuse
Okay,
me, Paul, real quick.
Yes.
So not knowing
it's on.
what this is gonna, how it's gonna be paid. I mean, I remember the cheapest build was $77 million. And just to throw to the residents, hey, here's a surtax. And most of you aren't gonna use this bus. It just seems absurd to talk about another tax. We got all this crazy inflation and fuel prices going on right now. I don't like the whole thing, period. That's my opinion. It's a lot of money.
Right. And the conversation around the surtax now is check. All right, thank you. So the surtax that is currently in place is, the discussion around it right now is if and what replaces that surtax. So it's not actually a new tax, it would be one that would be replacing the tax that's currently in place or extending it in some form. And what that
Still a
looks,
tax.
it's in some form, it's still a tax, yes, and what it could go towards is still yet to be determined. It's a conversation between the school district, the county, all the municipalities who have a vested interest in trying to get projects implemented. So it's still a conversation to be had, but that's one option for a potential surtax to use for.
And Richard, I can tell you, nothing will happen without a very robust discussion and shared participation. I think that Miami and Broward, if you look at some of the things that they have done in the past to expand their commuter connections, so maybe there would be more access to using Palm Tran or even Brightline from the airport to communities west. I know that the county and the cities along the way have been looking towards that. So I can promise you that there will be a robust discussion before anything is ever brought forward. Great, thank you. Sammy?
Oops, can you hear me? I just had a quick question. Does that include public engagement opportunities for this project? And when did you say it will be brought back to the governing body?
We anticipate the Okeechobee corridor multimodal corridor study to come back to the boards and the committees in October, so next month. And there was an extensive outreach process, which was already completed as part of this. We're currently going through kind of the last collection of efforts from the cities to make sure that especially the land use and economic development concepts are correct.
Mhm.
Some of the communities along the corridor already have land use and economic redevelopment opportunities. For example, Wellington at the Wellington Mall, they have very robust conversations right now within that community about what's going to happen. In terms of the public outreach opportunities, we've had hundreds of touch points with community members who live along the corridor, who use transit along the corridor, drive along the corridor as part of the process. That's all detailed on the website.
Now, will that include future public engagement opportunities like charrettes from the TPA?
We have in it as a follow-up to Okeechobee Boulevard, the next steps for the TPA are to identify opportunities along the remaining 561 corridors. Are you familiar with the 561 corridor plan? So the next steps are to identify the remaining roadway improvements which could be had along the rest of the communities. Ultimately, what we would do is try to identify the projects. And once those projects have been identified in collaboration with cities, stakeholders, jurisdictions along those routes, we would ultimately use that list and help to prioritize it for projects that could be used for surtax down the road.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Great. Any other comments? So we're going to move on to the CAC liaison report. Jason, would you like to share that with us? Thank you, Brian.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. So to go through the liaison report, the first update I have for you is a few staff member updates. Ryan Ruscher, the person that you just heard from, is now the Deputy Director of Multimodal. He was previously our Bike and Pedestrian Coordinator, and Valentina Facus was our Transportation Planner 1. She moved into the Pedestrian and Bicycle Coordinator position. So congratulate them on the multimodal team in terms of moving up to, we now have a director and we have a bike and pedestrian coordinator that was promoted within. And also we'd like to congratulate the town of Juno Beach for adopting a Vision Zero resolution on August 24th. Brightline, next item is Brightline has received a $25 million raise grant to fund safety improvements along their corridor. It's going to include multiple counties, including from Miami to Brevard County. So there'll be plenty of safety improvements for the money that they'll be receiving through the grant, which is about 25 million. And it'll be along the entire corridor. So, and the next item here is a public meeting for Connors Highway from First Street to State Route 80. It's a resurfacing project. And this project will address resurfacing, safety deficiencies and other upgrades along the corridor. And there'll be a public meeting that will take place on Thursday, September 8th, between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. at the City of Pahokee at their recreation complex. Next is an event that we'll be hosting here. It's called Parking Day. It is also a national event too. You can get information at myparkingday.org. But for us, we're going to celebrate it here on September 16th. We'll organize some events to celebrate. And then also there's a global event to encourage the purpose is to repurpose parking spaces into other uses. And so that's the concept between about Parking Day. Next item is Lakeworth Road improvements. There's a Lakeworth Road improvement project open house. So it looks like this has been delayed, and you can get more information at our District 4 office website at d4fdot.com/pbfdot. And it looks like this project was delayed due to duct iron sewer pipe requirements. So the open house, they'll probably give us a new date later on once it's rescheduled, and we'll follow up with the new date for the open house. Following that is I-95 and Glades Road. The Divergent Diamond Interchange is going to be open fairly soon, September 30th. And let's see, the Clintmore Bridge over I-95 is set to reopen in September 30th. And then the full opening is scheduled to occur in November. And so this will be the first diverging diamond in Palm Beach County. There are some in North Florida. And you can get more information at the website that's on the screen here. And lastly, the next item is SFRTA. They have a new executive director, David Deck. He's the new director that was recently appointed, and he was previously the vice president of rail operations in Capital Metro. Following that, we have Reconnecting Communities grants. This is a grant that will be due October 13th in 2022. We have information that you can find about this particular grant at transportation.gov/grants/reconnecting communities to get more information about it. And it's a grant that is ideal for finding projects that for communities that are previously cut off from economic opportunities and transportation infrastructure. So it's a grant to kind of bridge those gaps when communities are separated by infrastructures or any other impediments. And lastly, our TPA Governing Board meeting is next week on Thursday, September 15th at 9 a.m. here in our offices. And you can participate either here in our offices or live via our Zoom web link. We're still doing Zoom. And that concludes the liaison report.
Great, thank you. Any questions, any comments? I have one question about the Reconnecting Communities grant. The deadline is October 13th. You heard anything? Anybody been talking about it?
Brian Risher, Deputy Director of Multimodal TPA. I have not heard of many communities going after the Reconnecting Communities grant. That grant, I believe, is geared towards much larger infrastructure projects. However, we have had interest in a number of the federal programs such as RAISE. There's been some interest in discussion around using that grant program for Okeechobee Boulevard and retrofitting whatever the future facility could be. We did provide 4 letters of support, 2 are in draft form for the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program, which is a discretionary grant program out of FHWA. But I have not heard other movement on any of the other funding programs at this time, aside from what Jason outlined for Brightline.
Great, thanks. I mention it because Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard was one of those infrastructure projects that came through and cut off, in essence, 3 blocks of the Northwest neighborhood, our historic African-American business community in the downtown. And on top of that, not only did it, kind of cut off the neighborhood from itself, it created these zones underneath the bridge that are filled with homeless and all kinds of nefarious activity. And I know that the city, as well as the county, for many years had looked at ways to try to reactivate, and they've got a lot of plans, but not a lot of money. So that might be one that, I don't know what but I'll mention it to my commissioner.
Sure, thank you. And you did bring some to my attention, another initiative by the city of West Palm Beach with respect to the rail closures and openings grant. There's a couple of opportunities within the city that might be of interest to you. If you'd like to follow up with me after, we can discuss.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any questions? Moving on. So we have a couple of items on the agenda for consideration and a vote, but because we do not have a quorum, we're not going to be doing that. But does anybody here want to have presented for informational purposes, or you want to hold it off till October?
I would just say that we should present them as informational items. Staff is prepared to present to the committee. We just wouldn't be able to take a vote, as you said, Madam Chair.
Okay, well then, if you want to, if staff wants to move forward and present these as informational items, and if everybody's on board with that, that's something that we need to.
Yes, and Jason will come up to present the first item, which is an amendment to the TPA's fiscal year 23 to 27 Transportation Improvement Program, aka the TIP. And then we can move on from there after he's presented. You can open the floor to any discussion that members may have questions or public comment on the items. And then we can do the same for item B, which is regarding the UPWP or the Unified Planning Working Program.
Okay.
Just to clarify, so this is the only time he needs to do the presentation. We don't need to do the presentation again during the next meeting. The same
So
item, since we cannot vote it.
We don't have a quorum, so we're not going to be able to vote. And these are items that they need our approval on. So they're going to present just for information purposes. And I assume next month you'll ask us to vote on these.
These items will be going to the board in September. So we will not come back to the committee with for a vote, but you will hear about the items as informational. And at each of our board meetings, we do say like how each advisory committee has voted. Although you all will not have a vote in this case because there is not a quorum, any sort of dissension will be noted at the governing board meeting.
Okay.
Any other questions?
All right, Jason, thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So although this is not an action item, I'll go through the presentation and then we'll take discussion from there, and then we'll record that discussion and report back to and include that discussion and any points that you might have in the governing board meeting notes, so they know your position on this particular item, on the amendment. So this is amendment number 1 to the Transportation Improvement Program for fiscal year 23 through 27. And this is typically the first amendment is always a request by FDOT to advance funds roll forward from the previous TIP, the TIP that we're operating under now, and the recently adopted TIP that will begin to operate under in October. So this is not new funds that you'll see, but existing funds from the previous TIP being rolled forward to the TIP that will be operating under in the months to come. So there's also 2 modification requests for the length of 2 projects was incorrect or at least modified, and they'll now be changed to be correct and represented as they would be in the FDOT work program. So just to further describe what the roll forward is in terms of a graphic. So we're currently, previously is the fiscal year 22 through 26 TIP. And with that TIP, the last year, 2022, the funds that were not obligated or not used will now be rolled forward into the fiscal year 23. And then those funds will then become obligated or eligible to be used by those projects, to create consistency between the two tip documents and rolling forward the funds to be in the tip document that will soon be operating under. And so the total amount of funds between all the projects is about 114 million in total that's being rolled forward from the previous, the 22 tip to the 23. And because there's money that's being added to projects, some of those projects, the cost has increased over 20% or $2 million. So that's what triggers an amendment typically. And so with this roll forward, the amount of money being carried forward or added to these projects from the previous tip, which is still the money from those projects, is just being rolled forward, that triggers the amendment. And the only projects that are impacted are the projects within the amendment that are listed in the backup. There's a list of projects, about 60 or so projects, and those are the only ones impacted. There's other projects within the tip document that are not a part of this amendment and are not affected by this particular amendment. As a breakdown for the 114 million that is being rolled forward, the lion's share of it is in state road modifications. There's a couple of projects you'll see on the next slide that kind of make up the total amount being rolled forward. But you can see here, state road modifications is about 80 million, followed by the other two largest ones was railroad and strategic intermodal system capacity, which is about 11 million. So these are the projects that I was referring to in terms of the projects with the largest amount being rolled forward. And so when you look at the screen in terms of the financial columns to the right, the current tip is what we're currently operating under, and the old tip is where the roll forward funds are coming from, and those funds will be added back into this tip, which is the second column, which is the amount rolled forward. So that money from the 22 tip that I was referring to gets rolled into 23. And then the final column is the new project amount that will include the roll forward funds that were previously in the fiscal year 2022. You can see the largest ones are the State Route 7 project from 60th to North Lake, as well as the Okeechobee Boulevard 60th for State Route 7, followed by Boca Raton Passenger Rail Station, and lastly, the military trail at Forest Hill Boulevard. So those are just the largest ones where the amounts rolled forward. There is also two projects that needed to have their lengths corrected in the work program and be consistent with the tip. So this tip amendment will fix that issue. The first project is Atlantic Avenue west of Lyons Road. The length had changed from 1 mile to about 2.26 or 2.29. And that's the addition of the other legs of the intersection to include in the mileage. And then the last one, Beeline Highway, they were looking at a much larger stretch of the highway. And then through scoping the project, they've kind of fine tuned it to the 1.6 miles that they're actually going to do work within. But originally they looked at the entire corridor, and they're still going to do the entire corridor. They're just breaking it up into phases. And so the first phase is going to include about a 1.6 mile section. And with that, I'll take any questions at this time. And it's not an action item, so it's just an informational item. So let's open the floor up to discussion.
James?
Jason, just out of curiosity,
Sorry.
what is the 16 million for Brightline for?
They're at the Boca Raton station.
Yeah.
They're building a brand new station.
So it's just used for general construction?
Mhm.
Okay, just curious.
Yep. Any other questions?
Jim?
Yeah, the extension or the lengthening of the Atlantic Avenue they talked about. We saw maybe 2 meetings ago or so, different scenarios for widening from, I think, the Turnpike into Jog Road, I want to say. Is that, is that part of it? Is that, I know that's a much bigger project and so forth, but I wasn't sure. thought I remember seeing something come back and we looked at different scenarios on how to widen that road and so forth.
Good afternoon, Andrew Euler, Deputy Director of Program Development. Yes, so you all saw the product development environmental phase on that eastern portion, going from like Lions Turnpike to Jog Road, and we went forward with a preferred typical section for that. And we went to the Lakeport Drainage District recently to their meetings. After that needs to get sort of permitting for that and approval because we're taking some of their property as well. So that section is going to the 6 lanes. And then with that is included designated bike lanes, and then as wide of a pathway that we can fit. So on the north side of that roadway is going to be a 10-foot pathway. And on the south side, there's some choke points with the Lakeport Drainage District, but we're trying to keep it at 8 feet if we can. Sometimes it's going to go down to 6 feet. That was the alternative that we went forward with. And then this western section that Jason's talking about, just the length change here. That one is going to 4 lanes, but it has designated bike lanes and I think just a 6-foot sidewalk.
And then one last follow-up question on that. Is there any timing on when the widening is actually going to start the construction on the western portion? Because I know there's a lot of complaints I hear all the time about traffic on Atlantic from 441 into Lyons.
Sure, I can get you the, I'll look it up and go back to my computer real quick. It should be starting pretty soon in fiscal year 2024, so sometime maybe next year, but I'll get you a more accurate date.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Richard?
Thank you. On the State Road 7 extension, the new construction that was at the top of the slide there, we have a date yet set for possible groundbreaking on that?
They said. There's no groundbreaking date, but for the State Route 7 project, it says, because they're going to trial. Because it's being kind of challenged. So what I have from FDOT, it says that the trial is scheduled to begin October 17th and expected to take a few months. So nothing's really going to happen until they get through the trial period. So it's going to be delayed until that part.
course.
So
I realize
I
that.
don't think any,
Where's this trial taking place?
that I don't know.
House or anything?
I could ask.
Yeah.
And follow up with you.
I'll be a star witness if they need one.
I don't think it's that kind of trial. Well, I'll get you the date and where it is. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you. And now we'll move on to action, but for informational only, 2B.
Good afternoon. I'm Matthew Kama, the Chief Financial Officer here at the TPA. And I'm here to, provide information about an amendment to our Unified Planning Work Program, our UPWP. As a refresher, the UPWP is our business plan and our budget. It also constitutes our application for federal funds. So any changes, modifications to that, we have to follow a certain process. It serves the timeframe of July 1st, 2022, so it just started, through June 30th of 2024. And it tells what we're going to do, who's going to do that effort, when we plan to accomplish it, and how much that's ultimately going to cost. In this amendment, we have to make a change to include a building access security system for this facility. We had this planned for the previous cycle, but the work could not be completed. There were some permitting delays and some issues that held up that work. So we now have to reestablish the activity and the funds to accomplish it in this fiscal year. It is planned for later this month or in October. Hopefully that work would get accomplished. In that effort, task 7 for administering the agency, that's where that budget sits for the activity. And we had to reduce some of the funds in our public engagement task at this time. We still have other funds in public engagement, but we had to decrease some of them to balance for that. In addition, we had to clarify an activity in our UPWP. There are certain activities and efforts that have to be called out in the document. One of them is a peer exchange. We will be doing a peer exchange with several of our board members and decision makers and influential members regarding transit and other activities. They will be going to Cap Metro in Austin, Texas later this month. But the only addition here is really the sentence that we're doing that, and we're communicating that within this document. An additional change that we are addressing in this amendment is related to the carry forward funds. As we prepare our new UPWP, it's a 2-year budget. It's a little bit unique. And we estimate what activities we can do in that next year, in that next cycle, but we usually take out those funds before we finalize it and adopt it. They weren't taken out, so we have a little bit of extra money in there right now that's not authorized. What will happen is after we conclude all of the activities and the reimbursements for the previous cycle, we'll have a final number. That carry forward amount will be added later, most likely in the spring. But at this time, we have to take it out until we know the exact number, then we'll add it back in. And that number is about $210,000 that will be addressed. And finally, we are making a change within our local funds that we're using. Our local funds are very specific to the agency in that they're not tied to federal obligations, so they allow us to maximize our capabilities as a TPA to reach the public and really serve the community as best we can. And one of those efforts that's been advised by our executive committee is to focus some of our staff performance and really engage our staff with a lot of changes that have happened over the past 10 months or so. And how that's reflected here is we annually have some funds left over. We're going to reduce the amount that will be left over and put more time into this staff performance. We're going to bring in some trainers and some workplace improvement plans here just to strengthen our collaboration as a team and some of our presentation skills here. So that's about a $10,000 difference that is being taken from our balance that would go to the reserve and added and used this year. And ultimately, and the slide says a motion to recommend, but this is an information item at this time. But if there's any questions or comments, then I will relay those when we take them to the board.
Questions,
Yes, please.
Richard?
The security issues that were mentioned in the first slide, is that for during meetings or after hours of the building?
This is for 2 reasons. It does address some of the aspects during the meetings. You may notice some of our doors clack really loud. There's some to make those work properly. That will get caught up in this. So it will be on interior doors and exterior doors that we're installing that system. That gives us some more capability as we have many members of the public and public officials here. So it addresses both. In addition, I will just highlight in the past several months or earlier this year, we do have an officer who attends our board meetings and some of other meetings as required to ensure that all those who are here to support these efforts are safe as we can do.
So during a meeting such as today, is this going to lock the doors or
No,
no?
yeah,
That's what I
no,
was
so for fire security purposes, that's why it's a more complex
thinking. Mhm.
system, is we have to ensure that there are safe escape routes at all times in case something were to occur. So you have to make sure that system unlocks everything to get everyone out, but also can secure areas that don't need to be accessed all the time, or and then after hours, of course, that it locks things down.
Okay. I like the police officer thing. You don't need the rest of that stuff. Just put the cop back there. It's true. Absolutely.
Any other questions? I'd like to ask you one. On the agenda or the backup, you break out in the activity. Let me give you table 5, task 1, monitor public participation at TPA board and advisory committee meetings and other outlets. Present information and seek input from local governments, chamber of commerce, civic organizations, neighborhood associations, et cetera, to ascertain infrastructure and service needs to support economic development, promote community health, enhance safety, and grow travel and tourism. So we're going from a $98,000 fiscal year budget of in 2023 down to 23,000. This is for your consultants. That's what this, and it's what stands out to me is what you just discussed with respect to adding additional time for training and whatnot for staff. And I would think that that might be additional funds, but it might be a completely different subset.
So just to confirm, are you referring to table 5?
Yes.
Task 1 activities? Okay.
Yes.
Good, we're on the same page. So what's happening, we have $98,000 just for the consultant effort. We still have staff time budgeted to continue those efforts and activities. But just for the consultant supported portion of that, we were at 98,000 and we're reducing that to 63,000.
Okay, because it says 23,000 on this agenda,
It-
which is a big jump. Because I would think that you would want to bring in outside professionals to help with some of your training activity of your staff. That just intuitively makes sense to me, but I could be thinking of something different.
So you are correct. Some of the outside training is a very complicated matter with federal reimbursements. We're having we're navigating those waters. But to get the outside trainers, that's one of the reasons why we're making an adjustment in local funds. Because to get those outside trainers, it's very challenging right now. I mean, several conversations with the attorneys, state, federal government, so we can do that. But in this respect, if you don't mind, I might need to look at what, I'm not seeing the same thing. so.
I want to follow the agenda.
Now I understand better. This is not reflective of, this is not a change that we're making with this amendment. That's what was planned. And that was based on available funding that we had in fiscal year 2024. When we do that amendment in the spring, I anticipate we're going to have some additional funds and we will adjust that as necessary. I do want to point out this task 1 is public engagement. But we also have within our LRTP, which is beginning in this cycle, another aspect of public engagement, and we have funds just for that. But we're required to isolate the activities related to the LRTP so that we can track, hey, what is total for that. So
Right, I assume that's part of the training to make sure that you have all of the I's dotted and T's crossed with respect to your funding and what's allowed under this funding and what's allowed under that funding
and a lot of it's outreach. It's very important that we're able to obtain from the public, what do you want here? That's one of our core purpose is to identify what is wanted here in our community so that gets built. So there's a lot of effort planned and in the planning studies that are being conducted now, such as we see with the Okeechobee Multimodal Corridor Study and the LRTP. All of those are yes, there's consultants on what's the best way to do that. And there's also a lot of consultant effort to go and get that. Because we have a few staff. We do everything that we can to make sure we get those comments, get that information, and then incorporate it into the plans that we make.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, so those were action items that were presented only for informational purposes, and there are no informational items going forward. On your agenda, you've got governing board summary points, FDOT scheduling report. They're all within the backup. If there's anything that, you guys want to look at, feel free. If there's anything you want to ask about, here's your opportunity. 'Cause I think we're about to have the shortest meeting we've ever had.
Mhm.
Amanda, are we good?
Yep, and there are no public comments at this time, so if you are ready to adjourn, I will just note that the next scheduled meeting,
I apologize. I just
No
wanted to
problem.
let you all know ahead of time, I will not be in attendance at the October 4th meeting. I'll be traveling with the family. And didn't want to wait till the last minute and have a problem. Thank you.
but Chair Ryan, if you're ready, the next scheduled meeting is October 4th, and then you can adjourn.
Okay, great.
Tuesday.
Correct, it did switch, yes.
Great. Before we go, I'd just like to ask a question that came up based upon what was just said. So I live in West Palm Beach and in south of Southern on Olive Avenue, we have a car wash. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this issue. So it's been going on for a lot of years. The company that owns the car wash is very proactive. They've spent a lot of money and time trying to work with the community so that their backup doesn't end up causing traffic delays in the intersection at Southern Boulevard and Olive. So as a neighbor or as a resident, homeowner, we got a letter from the car wash. They're presenting a proposal with the city of West Palm Beach, which goes to both FDOT, according to the letter, it goes through all of the different agencies to approve because Olive, I think, is it a state road, federal road, Olive Avenue? State road. And then Southern Boulevard, is a federal road. But it's interesting to me because this company has been working for about 2 years and they've spent around $1 million. And it's exactly the kind of thing that, we're talking about getting the public engaged and having a place to come early on and start having those conversations about roadways, traffic that are impacting our cities. So is there anything that I can share with them about, or any other businesses going forward if they have issues like this? I mean, I think a lot of the downtowns are going to be facing the same kind of thing as we increase redevelopment in the older corridors and we have less parking. So, I mean, what is the public? How does the public engage? How does the public reach out and say, here's my problem? How can you guys help me? Where are some resources I can find to address this?
Yeah. Okay. I might have to get more information on sort of more that issue. Like as you're mentioning, I guess if it's just like a development issue, and it gets reviewed by, like you said, FDOT and the county and then the city. Sometimes we get those in as well for us to review, but we don't really commit a lot of staff time to trying to get on top of those and review those and have like our feedback on those. But if you're referring to more like our engagement as like in the sort of visioning that we do here.
Well, I mean, Doe Public doesn't know a lot about TPA to
Mhm.
begin with and what we do here. And most businesses are in the business of the business that they're operating in and understanding how different government agencies work. And this is one that we're constantly trying to get more public involvement and getting them to understand what goes on here and how they can convey. So if somebody wants to get more engaged and bring forward a problem that you could help not necessarily review and make recommendations, but give them a roadmap as to who they need to
agree.
go see and how you present, that, because clearly they went to the city at first and because they're going to redo their parking and driveway, and that's a site plan development issue. But because of its impacts on the roads, that's going to be a big part of it. And they probably, and from the time frame that they've been working on this, they probably didn't know that.
Sure, that's a good point. I guess reflecting on what we have here, our public participation plan has like a section of like that's dedicated towards sort of what does a citizen do to get involved in the different steps of the process. I don't think it expands upon like what you're talking about, where it is talking about like multi-jurisdictional, right? Where maybe we can provide more resources when it even comes to some local sort of decision like that by the city of West Palm Beach. So that's something to look into. And maybe we can discuss more about how that might play out.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be an interesting conversation, and it would be nice if you guys, you know, had an opportunity to at least hear it and participate, but I'll check in with them and then get back with you.
Okay.
Thanks. All right, so next meeting, October 4th, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. See you in October.
Bye.